In the dim light of a forgotten library, books whisper secrets and shadows slip between the shelves. A scream echoes among the stacks, but no one seems to hear, except Velma, now trapped by something unseen. The mystery begins where silence becomes suspicious, and Scooby-Doo and Shaggy must face the fear alone. The mystery machine rolled along a winding, tree-lined road, heading into the sleepy outskirts of Boston. A gentle autumn fog clung to the hills as Daphne, seated by the window, read aloud from a local newspaper article that had caught her attention. Centennial Library plagued by eerie phenomena, she read. Books fall without reason. Whispering voices heard after dark. Visitors claim they're being watched by invisible presences. Sounds like our kind of mystery. Fred, gripping the wheel with his usual focus, nodded. We'll check it out. Could just be drafts and old wood creaking, or something more. In the back, Velma adjusted her glasses and frowned thoughtfully. The Elmwood Library has stood for over 100 years. It was built over the remains of a colonial printing house, some say even a secret meeting place during the Revolution. If there's something strange, it might be rooted in its history. Next to her, Scooby and Shaggy were more interested in the map of local eateries than ghost stories. Like, do haunted libraries serve snacks? Shaggy asked. Because I can handle whispers as long as there's a sandwich involved. The library came into view, an imposing Victorian building cloaked in ivy and age. Iron gates screeched as they pushed open, revealing a gravel path flanked by stone statues and overgrown hedges. Inside, the scent of dust and aging paper saturated the air. The librarian, Miss Whitmore, a woman with snow-white hair coiled in a tight bun and a shawl that seemed older than the building itself, greeted them with visible hesitation. We've had disturbances, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Things that don't belong to this world. Some visitors leave and never return. And at night, the books whisper. Scooby shivered and clung to Shaggy, who laughed nervously. Maybe they're just overdue and angry about it. Despite the tension, the gang split up to investigate. Fred and Daphne headed to the archives downstairs. Velma, intrigued by the local history section, wandered to the back, noting unusual gaps in the shelves and strange symbols carved faintly into the wood. Shaggy and Scooby, naturally, gravitated toward a small reading cafe. Library lattes, Shaggy mumbled, biting into a croissant, his nerves briefly forgotten. Velma's curiosity deepened as she found a leather-bound volume without a title. As she opened it, the temperature dropped. The lights flickered. She turned, heart pounding, as a whisper brushed her ear, she sees too much. Suddenly, the corridor darkened. A pressure like cold hands pressed against her chest, forcing her backward. Her glasses flew from her face. Fred? Daphne? She gasped, but her voice didn't carry. No one answered. The shelves around her groaned and shifted, boxing her in. The whispering returned, louder, layered, impossible to trace. Between the lines, between the lives, find the silence, or be swallowed by it. Meanwhile, Scooby's ears perked up. He dropped his donut. Velma, he whimpered. Shaggy looked around. Did you hear that? That didn't sound like indigestion. They tiptoed out of the cafe, paws and feet creaking on the ancient floor. As they reached the corridor, they found Velma's glasses lying cracked on the ground. No sign of her. Just cold air and a book open to a page that hadn't been there before. Scooby sniffed the air, ears flat. Ruro, Shaggy knelt by the book. A single sentence had been written in hurried script, she is with the ink now. From above, a shadow moved, smooth, slow, watching. They turned just as it slipped behind a shelf. A whisper slithered through the corridor, the key is between the pages, Shaggy grabbed Scooby. Like, I think we just lost Velma to a haunted paperback. Scooby nodded. Roo-ha. Let's find Fred. They ran, sandwich abandoned, mystery unfolding. The chapter closes as the door to the history section creaks shut on its own, sealing itself with a sound like a sigh. The whispering returns, only this time, it's calling their names. Fred and Daphne stood in the dim basement archives of the Elmwood Library, surrounded by rows of metal cabinets and ancient tomes stacked high in forgotten corners. Dust particles danced in the beam of Fred's flashlight as he pulled open one of the file drawers. "Everything down here looks untouched for decades," he muttered, flipping through brittle yellow documents. Daphne turned, noticing a portrait hung askew on the wall, an old oil painting of the library's founder, Edgar W. Elmwood. His stern expression seemed to follow her. "Fred, do you think this place feels off? Not just old, but wrong?" Before he could answer, they heard a distant slam from upstairs. Then silence. Then a whisper, not quite a voice, more like a breath carried on the air. "Did you hear that?" Daphne asked, heart racing. Fred nodded and instinctively reached for his walkie-talkie. "Velma, come in. Anything on your end?" No response. Back on the ground floor, Scooby and Shaggy burst into the main reading room, panting and wide-eyed. Fred and Daphne met them halfway. "We can't find Velma," Shaggy shouted. Like, she was totally pulled into a literary abyss or something. Fred's expression hardened. "Show us where it happened." They followed the terrified duo to the history wing. Velma's broken glasses lay on the floor, and the mysterious leather-bound book rested open where they had left it. Daphne picked it up carefully. It's handwritten. No title. The ink is fresh, but the paper is centuries old. Fred examined the pages. "Listen to this, ink binds the spirit. Paper preserves the scream. If the librarian speaks, silence her, or the secret shall awaken." He looked around. "What does that mean? Who wrote this?" Just then, Miss Whitmore appeared behind them, seemingly out of nowhere. Her voice was sharp and brittle. "You shouldn't be reading that." They turned, startled. "Do you know what this is?" Daphne asked. The old woman stepped forward, closing the book with a snap. "That book does not belong in this world. It writes itself. Always has. It chooses who reads it, and who disappears." Scooby whimpered and hid behind Shaggy. "Roo-roo," Miss Whitmore lowered her voice. "Years ago, a librarian before me tried to destroy that book. She vanished, just like the girl. The whispers you hear aren't imagination. They are memories. Fragments of those who were taken." Fred remained calm. "Then we need to know how to get her back." The librarian hesitated. "There may be a way, but it's dangerous. There's a hidden wing of the library. It was sealed off after a fire in 1923. Rumors say it was built to contain books that should never have been written. If your friend is lost, she may be there." She handed Fred a tarnished key with the number 23 engraved on it. "You'll find a door behind the fireplace in the reading room. But be warned, once it opens, the library remembers you. It won't let you go easily." Fred nodded. "We're going in." Daphne turned to Scooby and Shaggy. "You two can stay here if you want." They both shook their heads, trembling. "Like, we're not leaving Velma behind," Shaggy said. "Even if we end up as footnotes." The gang returned to the reading room, and Fred located the fireplace. Scooby sniffed around until his nose nudged a loose stone. Pressing it, they heard a soft click. A narrow doorway opened behind the mantel, revealing a dark staircase spiraling downward. Torches lining the wall flickered to life, one by one, without anyone touching them. "Totally not creepy," Daphne whispered. They descended slowly, the sound of their footsteps muffled by thick carpet that shouldn't have been that clean in such a hidden place. At the bottom, they found themselves in a forgotten wing, its shelves taller, older, and unnervingly warped. Strange titles lined the spines. Whispers of the Nameless, Ink-Bound Shadows, The Book That Screams. Then a voice, low and tired, echoed through the room. Help, me, they turned. A shape flickered at the far end, half glimpsed in the torchlight. Velma? Daphne called out. The shape turned. Her eyes glowed faintly with ink-black irises. They write through me, she whispered. I tried to read the truth, but now I am the page. Scooby backed up, bumping into a nearby book. It fell open, revealing a passage that began rewriting itself before their eyes. The readers arrive, unaware of the cost. The chapter ends as the book slams shut on its own, the torches extinguish simultaneously, and darkness envelopes them. In the silence, the final whisper comes, you've turned the page, now you can't go back. Darkness swallowed the hidden wing of the library. The torches had vanished as if they'd never burned. Silence wrapped around the gang like a thick, suffocating fog, until Scooby sneezed. The sound echoed unnaturally, as though bouncing off endless walls. Fred flicked on his flashlight. Its beam cut through the blackness, revealing warped bookshelves that now twisted at impossible angles. The floor beneath them pulsed subtly, like breathing wood. We need to find Velma before this place changes again, he said, voice low but firm. Daphne pointed to a shimmering trail on the ground, drops of black ink forming a path between the shelves. She went this way. They followed, each step accompanied by soft creaks and the faint whisper of pages turning somewhere nearby. Shaggy hugged Scooby tighter. Like, if I get turned into a bookmark, tell my sandwich I loved it. Scooby whimpered. Roo-ha. As they moved deeper, the architecture shifted. Walls folded inward, creating tight passageways. Paintings of unnamed librarians lined the walls, each with black smudges where eyes should have been. One frame was empty, the nameplate beneath it bearing Velma's name. Fred froze. There, writing her into the library. The ink trail led them to a domed chamber at the heart of the hidden wing. Inside, a massive book hovered in the air, suspended by chains of light and shadow. Its pages turned slowly, each one displaying moving images, Velma's memories, her voice, her thoughts. Daphne stepped closer. It's alive. Suddenly, Velma's voice echoed through the chamber, not spoken, but written in the air around them, find the red index. It hides the truth. Before they could respond, the air rippled. A figure stepped out from the shadows, a tall man in an ink-stained librarian's robe, with skin like parchment and eyes hollow as forgotten chapters. His voice was dry and slow. She read too deeply. She belongs to us now. Fred stood between him and the others. We're taking her back. The librarian tilted his head. You don't take from the archive. You exchange. Knowledge has a price. Suddenly, books flew from the shelves and formed a spinning barrier around them. Daphne grabbed a book midair, the red index. Its cover burned at her touch, but she didn't let go. The librarian hissed. That index contains names that were erased. Whispered away. If you open it, you unwrite what has been forgotten. Fred helped Daphne pry the book open. Inside, the pages listed hundreds of names, and one glowed in red ink, Velma Dinkley. Just as they read it, a piercing screech tore through the chamber. The floating book slammed shut, and Velma's voice screamed from within. A crack formed in the center of the domed ceiling, and black ink began dripping down like rain. She's trapped inside the archive itself. Daphne shouted. Fred turned to the librarian. We want her back. What's the exchange? The ink-cloaked figure reached toward Scooby. A curious mind for a loyal heart. A reader for a companion. Scooby took a step back. Rua. Rue no way. Shaggy shielded him. Like, you'll have to go through me, you freakish footnote. The librarian laughed, a sound like dry pages shredding. Then perhaps, the coward will do. A shadow lunged toward Shaggy, separating from the librarian's body. Fred grabbed the glowing red index and held it high. This book is our key. You want balance? Then balance this. He slammed the book against the floating tome. The chamber shook. A blinding flash erupted, and for a brief second, Velma appeared, eyes wide, hand outstretched. Daphne reached for her. Velma. Velma's fingers brushed Daphne's, but the ink pulled her back. Her voice echoed again, "You must find the scriptorium. The original record. It rewrites everything." The vision vanished. The ink flood stopped. The gang stood breathless. The librarian was gone. Only silence remained. Shaggy looked around. Scriptorium. Is that, like, Latin for, creepy doom dungeon? Fred pocketed the red index. Whatever it is, it's our next stop. Scooby sniffed the air and pointed to a shelf that had moved, revealing a narrow staircase leading even deeper. Faint golden light shimmered below. Fred turned to the others. We go together. One step at a time. As they descended, the chamber above sealed behind them. The ink retreated. But one whisper remained, coiling in the shadows like a memory refusing to fade. Those who rewrite fate must face what was first written. The stone staircase descended farther than they expected, curving in dizzying spirals until the air grew heavier and the torches that lit their way began flickering blue instead of orange. Fred led cautiously, the red index tucked beneath his arm, while Scooby and Shaggy clung to each other, each step echoing like a warning in the depths. When they reached the bottom, the staircase opened into a massive underground chamber, unlike any part of the library they had seen. This place wasn't just forgotten. It was hidden on purpose. A circular hall stretched before them, lined with towering monoliths of stone, each carved with runes that shimmered faintly under the torchlight. The air smelled of wet ink and old metal. In the center stood a pedestal of black marble, and resting upon it, chained by iron links, was a quill unlike any other, silver, feathered, pulsing with light and shadow. Daphne stepped forward. The scriptorium, she whispered. This is where the original stories were written. Fred approached the pedestal. If Velma is trapped in the archive, and this is where it all began, maybe we can write her back. Scooby frowned. Rewrite her. Shaggy rubbed his arms. I'm not a fan of creative writing under pressure, man. As they examined the pedestal, an inscription revealed itself along the floor, only one may write. Only truth may bind. What is erased must first be remembered. Daphne glanced at Fred. Only one of us can use the quill. Before Fred could answer, a sudden rush of cold air blew through the chamber. One of the stone monoliths cracked open like a book, and from within emerged a figure draped in layers of ink-soaked robes. Its face was a swirl of text, sentences shifting, changing, never settling. Its voice was like a page being turned in reverse. I am the first scribe. The keeper of the true record. No name can be restored that was not first known. What do you offer to reclaim the lost one? Fred stood his ground. Her name is Velma Dinkley. She's part of us. We know her. We remember her. The scribe tilted its head. Memory is not enough. You must prove her essence. Her truth. Her fear. Her strength. Ink binds the soul. Paper binds the ink. Will you bear the burden of the rewrite? Daphne stepped forward. We will. The scribe pointed toward the center of the room. The floor shifted, revealing 4 panels. Each glowing with a different color, red, blue, yellow, and green. You must walk her memories. Face her truths. Only then can you reclaim her name. Without hesitation, Fred stepped onto the red panel. Daphne chose blue. Shaggy and Scooby, reluctantly, were pulled toward the yellow and green panels by unseen forces. In a flash, each of them was separated, transported into Velma's memories. Fred's trial, the logic that broke. Fred found himself in a school lab, surrounded by beakers and books. Velma stood across the room, arguing with a faceless professor. Her voice trembled. Logic can't explain everything. Sometimes, you have to feel the answer. Fred watched, then stepped forward. The memory noticed him. Do you believe in her? The faceless professor asked. I always have, Fred replied. The room froze. A burst of red light exploded from the center, and the memory shattered, leaving behind a glowing fragment of Velma's glasses. Daphne's trial. The fear she hid. Daphne appeared in a dark locker room, mirrors fogged and doors slamming. Velma sat alone, hiding her face. From the shadows came whispers, she's not brave. She just hides it better. Daphne moved closer. Velma, you're the strongest person I know. The whispers grew louder. Daphne closed her eyes and repeated it louder, you're strong. You're not alone. A mirror cracked, revealing a blue shard, part of Velma's locket. Daphne picked it up and vanished. Shaggy and Scooby's trial, loyalty without words. The two materialized in a maze of shifting bookshelves. Velma's voice called out faintly, you'll leave. Everyone leaves. Scooby howled. Runo. We stay. Shaggy panted, chasing the voice. Like, we're here, Velma. Always. Suddenly, a monstrous figure formed from pages rose before them, made of every fear they'd ever had. But Scooby stepped forward and licked its face. The creature froze. Then burst into green and yellow light, leaving behind two items, a page torn from Velma's diary and her old science medal. All four were pulled back into the chamber. Fred placed the glasses on the pedestal. Daphne laid down the locket. Shaggy and Scooby dropped the diary page and medal. The first scribe nodded. She is remembered. She may now be rewritten. The chains around the silver quill loosened. Fred picked it up, hand shaking. But just as he prepared to write, the chamber trembled violently. From above, ink rained like acid, and the ceiling split open. A voice roared, do not rewrite what was sealed. The librarian had returned. Only now, he wasn't alone. From the cracks emerged dozens of spectral silhouettes, half-written souls, erased names, cursed readers, floating downward like forgotten pages fluttering from the rafters. The chapter ends as Fred raises the quill, surrounded by rising shadows, and Velma's voice whispers from nowhere, write quickly, or they'll write you out. The chamber roared with chaos as the ink-stained ceiling split further, raining drops of liquid shadow that hissed upon touching the ground. Fred held the silver quill tightly, its tip glowing faintly as if resisting the darkness. The spectral figures swirled through the air, blurred silhouettes of lost readers, their mouths open in silent screams, their hands clutching half-written pages and fragments of their former selves. The librarian hovered above the chaos, no longer human. His robe had unfurled into a swirling mass of letters and torn parchment, his face a pulsing knot of unreadable ink. You defy the archive, he thundered. You break the seal of silence. No story escapes once it is shelved. Fred shouted over the wind. She never belonged to this place. We're not characters on your shelves. The first scribe remained at the edge of the battle, eyes watching without expression. Only truth can write her free. The pen is yours. But beware. The archive fights back. Scooby and Shaggy clung to each other, dodging shadows that lunged like living bookmarks. This is definitely above my reading level. Shaggy cried, ducking as a flying volume nearly took his head off. Ruha. Scooby barked. Velma now. Right now. Fred turned to the pedestal, unrolling a blank scroll that shimmered with unread potential. The red index pulsed beside him, as if urging him forward. He dipped the quill in the ink that now pooled across the floor. The second it touched the page, everything froze. The chamber darkened again, not black, but the color of unwritten thought. Velma's voice emerged within Fred's mind, not a memory, but her real voice, distant and muffled. Write only what is true, not what you wish. I must be remembered as I am. Fred's hand trembled. He began to write, Velma Dinkley, daughter of reason, seeker of truth. She does not fear the unknown. She studies it. She faces darkness with questions instead of weapons. The ink shimmered, forming glowing characters on the page. The floating specters screamed in protest. The librarian shrieked and extended his clawed hand, launching a wave of corrupted pages toward Fred. Daphne blocked the assault with the red index, now glowing like a shield. You'll have to go through all of us to erase her. Fred continued, she is not defined by fear, but by loyalty. She is one of us. Not a tale trapped on a shelf, but a friend we chose, and who chose us. As he finished the final line, the scroll ignited in blue light. A sound like a book snapping shut echoed through the chamber. A portal burst open in the air beside the pedestal. From its center, a figure emerged, coughing, exhausted, eyes wide with disbelief. Velma. Where, she stammered, looking around. Then she saw them. Fred. Daphne. Scooby. Shaggy. She stepped forward, shaking, and collapsed into their arms. They embraced her tightly as the chamber convulsed. The portal remained open, but the room itself was unraveling, walls melting into words, floorboards splintering into half-finished sentences. But the librarian wasn't done. You have undone centuries, he bellowed. One life cannot outweigh the archive. He raised both arms. From the darkness, the ink spirits surged one final time. The first scribe, silent until now, stepped into the center of the storm. You have broken the pact, he said to the librarian. You wrote without consent. You shelved what still had life. You are no longer the keeper. You are the mistake. A bolt of golden light burst from the scribe's palm, striking the librarian in the chest. The creature's form unraveled, his letters scattering into the air, his final cry dissolving into static whisper. The ink spirits followed, fading into nothingness, released. The chamber began collapsing around them. Fred looked at the scribe. How do we escape? The first scribe gestured toward the portal. The truth opens the door. You've written it. Now walk through it, before the ink dries. The gang didn't hesitate. Together, they ran into the light, carrying Velma between them as the world of shadows and forgotten stories crumbled behind them. As the portal closed, the last thing they heard was the scribe's whisper, "May your story never be forgotten." They awoke back in the main library, in the reading room. It was quiet. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows. The fireplace was cold. No ink on the floor. No open books. No hidden doors. Velma sat up slowly. Was it real? Fred nodded. Every word. Daphne helped her to her feet. We got you out. You're safe now. Shaggy handed her a wrapped snack cake. Like, nothing says, welcome back from literary limbo, like breakfast. Velma took it with a soft laugh. Thanks, guys. But as they turned to leave, Scooby paused. His ears perked. He looked back toward the shelves. A book rested on a pedestal that hadn't been there before. It was titled, The Story That Escaped. And its author was listed as, Velma Dinkley. The chapter ends with Scooby slowly backing away as the book opens on its own, and a single page turns, revealing the final chapter, waiting to be written. The morning light pouring into Elmwood Library felt different, cleaner, warmer, as though the building itself had exhaled after centuries of holding its breath. The gang stood silently around the mysterious book now resting on the pedestal in the center of the reading room. The Story That Escaped, Daphne read aloud. By Velma Dinkley. Velma stepped closer. Her name, printed in gold ink, shimmered faintly under her fingers. She opened the cover slowly. Instead of words, the pages glowed with soft light, as if her memories had been transcribed not in ink, but in essence. Images flickered across the parchment, her childhood curiosity, her first case, meeting the gang, solving mysteries, laughing through fear. "It's my story," she whispered. "But not just mine, ours." Fred placed a hand on her shoulder. "It wrote itself because you lived it. It wasn't a record. It was a rescue." Shaggy peeked over her shoulder. Does it mention me saving the day with a salami sandwich? Because I'd really like that in writing." Velma laughed softly. "Even that." But the moment was broken by a faint creaking sound. The fireplace groaned, and once again, a panel in the wall slid open. This time, there was no spiral staircase. No darkness. Just a corridor of clean white stone, lined with empty frames. Miss Whitmore stood in the doorway, her posture different, straighter, clearer. Her eyes no longer darted nervously. She looked calm. "You did what no one else could," she said. "You unbound the archive. The stories that were trapped, are free." Fred frowned. "What happens to the library now?" She gestured to the corridor. "It becomes what it was always meant to be, a place where stories live, not where they die. But it needs new guardians. And it's offering you a choice." Scooby tilted his head. "Rue, what choice?" Miss Whitmore stepped aside. "The library remembers your names now. You could stay. Record truths. Protect voices. Keep history safe from silence." Silence fell over the gang. Velma stared at the empty frames, each waiting for a new story, a new name. For a moment, her expression softened, as if she considered it. But then she turned back to her friends. "We've got more mysteries to solve. More people to help. I can't shelve myself yet." Fred smiled. The mystery machine still got miles to go. Daphne touched the book. "But we'll leave a copy. In case someone else needs to remember who they are." Miss Whitmore nodded with a small smile. "Then the library will never forget you." Scooby gave a cheerful bark and wagged his tail. "Ready, Reggie?" Let's get out of here before another creepy portal opens," Shaggy said. "And maybe hit up that diner down the road?" They laughed together, walking out as the first official visitors to escape the spectral library. As they exited, Velma paused one last time at the threshold. She looked back at the pedestal. The book now glowed brighter. Another page had appeared. She leaned in. The title at the top of the blank page was already written, "Their Next Mystery." A gust of wind flipped the page. Then another. Words began writing themselves. Velma smiled. Back in the mystery machine, the gang drove into the rising sun. Fred was at the wheel. Daphne checked the map. Shaggy passed Scooby a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And Velma sat quietly, watching the trees go by, her hand resting gently on a leather-bound notebook. No one said anything for a while. And then, Velma broke the silence. "You know, I don't think that place was haunted." Fred raised an eyebrow. "No." She shook her head. "I think it was lonely." The road curved gently into the distance, open and endless. And the whisper of pages followed them, not with fear, but with gratitude.